WD, Fred Payne.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for allowing us to spend some time with you today. I will talk a little bit about, I will really introduce myself to some of you that I've not had a chance to really sit down with and have any meaningful dialogue to explain kind of my direction of the agency as well as my background. And then we'll talk a little bit about the agency and some of the fiscal things that we've had going on. So just very briefly, a little bit about myself. I came to the DWD about approximately a year ago. Prior to that, when I moved to Indianapolis, I worked as an employment and labor lawyer. Then when Honda Manufacturing of Indiana opened its doors, I went there to help start the legal division. And I worked in various capacities there, ultimately leading our company operations and our business operations. And it was in those operations that I oversaw two distinct units that relate directly to our workforce. One is the administration area, one is the planning area. The planning area essentially tells, what products need to be produced by when and the types of employees we need to produce those products. The other side is the administration side, which essentially is the HR function, the staffing portion of it. And it was those two areas combined that allowed me to see in depth what our workforce development system was doing and how our economy was changing and how we needed as a company to change and to transition with it. Then about a year ago, I came over to the Department of Workforce Development. And I'll share with you a little bit of my vision as we talk throughout this presentation here this morning. I think all of you have maybe a printed version of the slide deck that we have here. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. So we'll start off a little bit talking about where Indiana is right now in our labor market. As we're probably aware, we know our unemployment rate in Indiana is at 3.5%. Compare that to 2010, when the unemployment rate was about 11%. Our national average or national rate at the time was about 9.8%. Now it's 3.7%. We've had about 5 years of Indiana being below the national average on our unemployment rate. So we're about the 9th lowest in the country in terms of unemployment rate. Our labor force to date has increased by about 79,000 Hoosiers. Indiana has a population of about 6.6 million. We have about 3.2 or 3.3 million Hoosiers who are now in our labor market. This is significant because this number, the 3.2 million Hoosiers in the labor market, this is the most Hoosiers we've ever had in our labor market. So we have a labor participation rate of about 65.1%. Again, this is above the national average of about 62.9%. And our labor force participation and our labor rate, our labor market rate for our industries, we have about 5, maybe 6 industries that really dominate in terms of the number of employees. Trade, transportation, and utilities will make up about 600,000 people. Manufacturing alone makes up about 531,000. So over the next 10 years, we'll have more than 1 million jobs to fill. Those jobs will consist of about 250 new jobs, and the other jobs will be replacement jobs. Now we have about 100,000 job openings in the state of Indiana, and on this slide you'll see where that has changed over the month. We update this data about 2 times a month. So in terms of our Indiana population growth, over the last few years, we've seen some growth, but not as much as we wanted. The growth has really been concentrated in just a few areas. We have a few areas where there has been some small population growth. Those areas have been in central Indiana, Lafayette, Fort Wayne, Bloomington, Jeffersonville, and St. John. those are the areas that have had population growth of more than 400 people. So the population change between 2010 and 2017, about 40 counties actually gained residents. However, 52 counties actually lost residents. So when we talk about our agency, the Department of Workforce Development, what we have focused on over the last year is what I call getting back to our basics, getting back to our functional foundations of the agency. Our agency has historically focused on 3 areas, and we wanted to make sure that we're focusing all of our resources on those, actually 2 areas, and we added 1 area this year. The agency focuses on administering our unemployment insurance trust fund. So we administer the unemployment insurance programs. Then the second unit of the agency is our workforce operations, which covers our workforce training and workforce development programs. The workforce operations and workforce development is funded and divided into 2 sectors, with our federal funding and our state funding. We have, on the federal side, we have programs and metrics that we have to meet under what's called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and our Wagner-Pizer Act. But from a state perspective, our focus is adult basic education, next level jobs, jobs for America's graduates, and programs leading to certifications in Work Indiana. But earlier this year, we started the Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship through executive order from the governor in March. And so that's the 3rd unit of the DWD. So until March of this year, the agency was focused on those 2 distinct units, unemployment insurance and workforce development. So when it comes to funding, we look at really 2 big streams of funding with the agency. We have our state funding, then we have our federal funds. Federal funds make up about 63% of the overall expenditures, whereas state funding makes up approximately 30% of that. And you can see there's a small portion or a portion that's dedicated funds. So the breakdown of this is really with our general fund expenditures. We see monies going to career and technical ed, adult basic ed, Jobs for America's Graduates, which is focused on high school dropout prevention, Work Indiana, and we have other funding. As you can see throughout this, there's sort of a theme on credential attainment. We want to ensure that individuals who have the right training and the right credentials are in a position that they can live their best lives and do the things that will make them live good, meaningful lives for them and their families. So 72% of the general fund appropriations are granted to our regional and local providers and employers. So those monies go out to those region and those providers. But we also have state funds that actually help to leverage about $16.6 million of the federal funding. So part of the state funding is needed to help leverage those in the adult basic ed area, in the Jobs for America's Graduates program, Work Indiana, and our Serve Indiana programs. When we look at the data and outcome-driven solutions, and this is a document that we've submitted that's required to be submitted to you, that's been submitted before. When we look at investments by agency, or we look at our federal metrics, as far as the DWD is concerned, we look at our employment, what we're looking like after exit from one of our facilities after they've engaged, median earnings, credentials, and measurable skills gains. But this, over the past year, we've added new complementary state metrics, which we believe will help us drive the real core of the DWD, which really is connecting individuals to training, connecting individuals to jobs, and connecting employers to individuals who have the skills that they need for their jobs. So we added these 3 state-based metrics, which are the engagement rate, how are we engaging with individuals and businesses, job connectedness rate, how are we connecting people to the jobs that they need. But we've also added a focus on wage change. If you look across, we'll see that wage change is a big factor for individuals, and we want to make sure that they are having some measurable gains. So when you look at the time period here, we had about a total number served of about 229,000. Of those served, we had about 35,000 that were trained, but the others, the 173,000, were folks who entered employment. So the overall outcomes, we had about 75% of those who touched the facilities to enter into employment, and the others entered into some type of training. Then we had about 18,000 who received some type of high wage, high demand, or other credential. And again, that is part of our focus to make sure that we are credential driven. So when we go back and look at 2018, just a snapshot of that year, of this year, and some of the goals that were put out by the governor in his State of the State address, some related directly to workforce and workforce development. We wanted to share with you some of those, how we are reaching some of those goals and where we are with that. So the governor laid out in terms of individuals getting the credentials that they need, particularly starting with a high school diploma or high school equivalency. He laid out a directive or a goal of us helping 30,000 Hoosiers to gain a high school equivalency or diploma that did not have one. Through the end of Q3, we have helped over 22,000 individuals to receive their high school equivalency. Then in terms of our work-based learning area, our Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship, the goal was to ensure that we double the number of apprentices and folks who are in work-based learning programs throughout the state by the end of 2019. We have a progress of about 4,500, so we've added about 4,500 individuals to some type of apprenticeship or work-based learning program within the past year since actually March. One of the other goals was to ensure that at least 1,000 individual inmates who leave our prison system, that they are leaving with a high wage, high demand certification while they're in prison. So it focuses on pre-release credential attainment. Our progress through the Q3 is about 750 graduates, and plus we've worked with the Department of Corrections, and they've established new programs related to CNC, welding, and machinery programs. We also had a goal of increasing our employer partnerships through our Next Level Jobs program and to obligate certain training funds. So we had an initial goal of reaching and partnering with about 250 employers. We have actually had engagement and agreements with over 450 employers. And we have those agreements in place, and the funding has been fully obligated. The other goal was to establish about 250 new Jobs for America's Graduates programs over the next 5 years. The progress through the Q3 is about 19 new programs established for school year 2018 and 19. In continuing to look at 2018, we've had about 10,000 Hoosiers or residents who are enrolled in high-wage, high-demand workforce-ready grant programs, which is part of our Next Level Jobs programs that's devoted to helping individuals to receive the training and credentials that they need. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 450 employers who are part of our employer training grant program, and those employers either are training or have trained a total of over 7,000 workers who are in that pipeline getting some training. That exceeds our initial goal. Again, we wanted to continue to expand our Jobs for America's Graduates program. That program has boasted a high school graduation rate of about 95%, which is above the state average of about 89%. So the program is continuing to show good results, and we're trying to expand that. In the adult basic education area, in 2018, the end of the third quarter, we've seen about 4,800 individuals to receive a high school equivalency or high school diplomas earned in the adult basic ed space alone. We're ranked third nationally in that space. We have about 300 different employer partnerships, resulting in about 88% of those participants in those adult basic ed programs getting employed. So that underscores our commitment to connecting individuals to the resources they need to live their best lives. We also have our Hoosier Initiative for Reentry program. We received an award for state excellence from the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. This year alone, that program boasts about 1,200 business partnerships, and we've had about 2,500 ex-offenders placed into employment. And we have a 3-year recidivism rate of about 15%. General average recidivism rate is around the 30% mark, so in that program, we've pretty much cut that into half. So what we're doing with that program now is we're shifting our focus a little bit. Instead of focusing more on attainment after release, we want to focus on credential attainment prior to release. This gives the individuals a better opportunity to receive a credential and to have a higher paying job once they leave our prison system. But it also gives us an opportunity to help continue to reduce that recidivism rate by having individuals in higher paying, higher demand jobs and getting them eligible for that. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we started our Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship back in March, and we've had a creation of what we call our SEALs, our State Earn and Learns, our state certification model. And on the unemployment insurance side, we are ensuring that we are modernizing our claimant self-service portals, as well as ensuring that we will update our employer portals. March of next year, we'll launch different services and updated online services for our employers. When we talk about the vision and the direction of the agency, as you've probably heard or picked up throughout my discussion with you here this morning, we're focused on really two things, connecting and engaging. So our agency is having a single focus. Our single focus is connecting people and employers, connecting people and employers to the right training, connecting employers to the right talent, and connecting people to the right jobs. The question becomes, well, how do we plan to do that, and what have we been doing to accomplish those things? Well, we want to have continued process improvements internally and externally with our workforce development boards. We've worked with them, and we are ensuring that we have the right level of engagement to drive decision-making locally, and to make sure that we are equipping our local workforce development boards to have the right resources that they need to service the individuals locally and customers locally. So we're looking at our service delivery models. How are we delivering those services throughout our communities locally? And we're having better state and federal program alignment and information sharing. I think that at this point, we've had an unprecedented amount of engagement throughout our communities and throughout our workforce development system with education, with businesses, and with government. Right now, we are trying to ensure that that engagement is paying dividends and connecting individuals and employers where they need to be connected. Another way that we are refining our focus and connecting people and employers is by empowering our local and regional decision makers with accountability. One example of that is that we increased our federal targets, our federal metrics, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, we've added some state complementary types of metrics. But in addition to that, we are not just asking our regional partners to just go and achieve higher numbers of metrics and to focus on those metrics. We reallocated dollars within our own agency to make sure that we're helping them to reach more people. And so we reallocated really a total of about $2 million, $1.5 million through local workforce development board grants. And we distributed that throughout those agencies, or throughout those regions locally, so that they can focus on the things they need to focus on. So we want to make sure that we're supporting our core partners, our employers. As I mentioned earlier, the number of employers who are engaged in our employer training grant program is over 450, who are training about 7,000 individuals. Supporting our education and training providers. We've increased the number of training providers on our eligible training provider list under our Workforce Ready Grant program, which is under Next Level Jobs. And we have better alignment with some of our governmental agency partners, with the IEDC, with the Department of Corrections, DOE, CHE, and FSSA. And so the other part of the connection piece is making sure that we are aligning our training to what businesses and communities need locally and regionally, and making sure that we have support at the industry that's in those different areas. So we're trying to focus on having some of that demand-driven type of workforce and have that information available to employers and individuals so that they can make the best decisions that they need. So we believe that our single focus at the DWD of connecting people and employers will help continue to advance the ball in workforce development. Sometimes it's indicated that since we have a 3.5% unemployment rate, then employers don't need as much help as they would if we were in an 11% unemployment economy. But with the 3.5% unemployment rate, employers are having challenges in dealing with a difficult community that they would normally have to recruit from. So we're having to look at different ways to accomplish some goals, because in an 11% economy is totally different than 3.5% unemployment economy. So hopefully that's given you a good idea on where we're going with the agency, some of the things that we've done over the past year within my tenure. And one of the things that we have rallied behind at the agency is one specific agency level theme. And we think that that theme covers what we need to do to advance our workforce development system. And that is connecting people and employers through engagement with continued accountability and transparency. And that's our focus, and those are the things that we consider to be our North Stars at the agency.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Brown.
There may be some that maybe overlap. You may have an individual who was served. They could have come in for training and a job, and they may have gotten both training and they got a job in that same time period too.
Okay, so then the next number down, earned employment, 75% of that, that's not listed, right? The 75, well, 172,000 or so earned employment. So they weren't in the employed before?
They came to our facilities looking for employment. These are the ones connected.
Just skilled up and not a job.
That may be a double category.
That would be good to know.
Yeah.
Is that what-
Okay. I can follow up with you to give you a precise answer.
And then the question, in your budget numbers, you seem to be eliminating the CTE innovation advancement category, maybe shifting it to the next level job step, that looks like a wash. I assume the dropout prevention is J,
Yes.
so you're increasing that. And then work Indiana, significant increase, significant decrease. What is that?
Okay.
5 million to 1 million.
So those fundings are going to be reallocated. The focus again is on credential attainment. So in the Work Indiana space, we're shifting a part of the funding to our Workforce Ready grant program. And that program is designed to get credential attainment. So we'll be serving some of the same population, but pushing more money toward credential attainment.
Okay, so what was actually,
No, go right ahead.
What exactly then was the Work Indiana program?
Work Indiana program was a program that helped provide training and support to individuals to receive either and a high school equivalency and a high-waged credential. And the Workforce Ready Grant program does similar things as well. So we're shifting the focus to the Workforce Ready Grant program.
It kind of sounds like the same thing, just saying.
Well, in terms of the credential attainment, yes, but there are some aspects of the Work Indiana program that were pushed that don't really focus completely on the credential attainment, so it may focus a little bit on maybe the high school space in that credential attainment, high school equivalency or high school diploma, and we have other programs in place to cover that.
Okay.
And this is reducing a little bit of duplication.
Okay, good answer, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Department of Natural Resources and Cam Clark.
use this as an example when you see what we handed out.
Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Senator, members of the committee. My name's Cam Clark. I'm the director of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. With me today, to my left, is Mike Smith. He's the deputy director and chief of staff and CFO. Other members of our team: Chris Smith, deputy director; John Davis, deputy director; Colonel Steve Hunter, who is the head of our law enforcement division, and Jeff Sossaman is our chief budget officer. So we've got a full contingent with us today. Before we get started, Chris passed out a couple items for you that are just a idea to give you the amount of properties that we manage around the state and where they are. Very proud of it, but more importantly is you're really not far from one of our properties wherever you are in the state. And equally as important is a little advertisement for you all, since this is the season of giving. We do this every time of the year. This time of the year, it's our bundle pack for Christmas gifts for people that comes with a subscription to our Outdoor Indiana magazine, a gift card to our inns, and we think it makes a great Christmas gift. So if any of you are looking for ideas, you now have one. What I'd like to do first is, I'm not sure how many folks in the crowd here have an idea of the history of DNR. I'm going to give you a brief one. The state's first environmental law was enacted in 1849 when in Greene County it was made illegal to poison fish. And when you think about it, that was 10 years or more before the Civil War. And I think it was more about water quality at the time than it was about the fish. But in 1881, a Department of Fisheries was formed with an annual budget of $2,000, 300 of which was the salary of the commissioner, which, when you think about 15% of the overall budget being the director's salary, I long for the old days. The oversight of game animals was added in 1899, and as many of you know from when I was here 2 years ago, Colonel Richard Lieber started in the spring of 1916, looking for properties around Indiana to be dedicated as state parks in celebration of the state's 100th anniversary in statehood. Later that year in December, Turkey Run and McCormick's Creek State Parks were dedicated as our first state parks. 1919, Governor Goodrich signed into law a bill that created the Department of Conservation, which combined 5 different divisions. That's geology, entomology, forestry, land and waters, and fish and game. And Colonel Lieber, who was instrumental in getting that legislation passed, was named the first director of the agency. The legislature acted again in 1965 when it formed the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, combining 4 different state agencies, of course, the Department of Conservation, the Flood Control and Water Resources Commission, State Soil and Water Conservation Committee, and the Outdoor Recreation Council. And the DNR today looks a little different. It's comprised of over 20 different divisions that are grouped essentially into 3 bureaus. Our administrative divisions fall under 1 bureau, and they are overseen by Mike Smith. Our water resources and regulatory divisions fall under Chris Smith, and our lands and cultural resources divisions fall under the purview of Deputy Director John Davis. Regulatory divisions, as many of you know, include our Division of Water, our Division of Entomology and Plant Pathology, our Historic Preservation and Archaeology, our Division of Oil and Gas, and Division of Reclamation, which is the division that oversees the reclamation of closed and abandoned coal mines. Land management divisions are the ones you're most familiar with: state parks, nature preserves, forestry, Fish and Wildlife and Outdoor Recreation, we also have a division of land acquisition. Each division has its own specialty and mission, from managing some of the state's most sensitive natural areas to helping to make sure coal mines are reclaimed to viable and suitable wildlife and agricultural lands. We have 32 state parks, 25 fish and wildlife areas, 13 state forests, 2 off-road vehicle properties, and we manage about a third of the almost 300 state-dedicated nature preserves around the state. That's a brief overview of the Department of Natural Resources and what I like to think of as a true microcosm of state government. We have a tremendous amount of diversity amongst those divisions, providing a variety of services to the people of Indiana, all working together towards the agency mission. And when you think about state government as a whole, that's what state government does as well. So we're very proud of what we do, of our diverse services and activities, and look forward to keeping those services going. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Mike Smith, to talk a little bit about our proposed budget.
Good morning. On the fiscal side of things, our budget request primarily represents carrying forward anticipated expenditures during this current fiscal year, with a few minor exceptions. One area that I would like to emphasize is our Division of State Parks. We have seen 4 consecutive years of revenue growth. Beginning in May of 2015, we increased gate attendance fees $5 per in-state vehicle to $7 per vehicle, and the out-of-state went from $7 to $9 per vehicle. We also increased some campsite fees as well. So in 2015, our revenue within the State Parks Division was $26 million, and last year, fiscal 2018, it was $33 million plus. Because of this, we've been able to, pardon me, we've been able to invest over $2 million within our campground improvements. One of the biggest is going from a 30 amp electrical system to a 50 amp system at our campsites. We've also been able to fill the majority of our park vacancies, which means better customer service. The restrooms are being cleaned and the grass is being mowed. These are areas that suffered during high vacancy days. We would like to continue this positive momentum going forward into the next biennium. The rural broadband efforts that recently were announced in the Governor's Next Level Connections Plan will complement this momentum and will be hugely well received by our guests. Our number one complaint at the property level is lack of Wi-Fi. Over the last 24 months, we've been able to successfully address several wage compression and salary equity challenges throughout the department. I would like to emphasize one of those improvements. Prior to 2017, all of our property managers were in the same job classification. Didn't matter the size of the park or the property or the visitation or anything else. Through assistance of the State Personnel Department, we were able to initiate a property manager tier system that established 3 separate classifications based upon the diversity of the property, whether the property had a lodge, cabins, pools, horse camps, etc. This was a big win for DNR. The last thing I'd like to mention is our excellent working relationship with the Department of Correction. At many properties, we receive inmate labor work crews that significantly assist us in our day-to-day labor efforts. One example, at Chaina Lake State Park, which is in Noble County, northwest of Fort Wayne, we share a property with a DOC minimum security facility. Chaina Lake State Parks receives 25 inmates per day, 7 days a week. They work approximately 7 hours a day. That equals about 60,000 work hours throughout the year, which at a minimum rate of $10 per hour is well over $500,000. Their work consists of simple housekeeping chores, to being an auto mechanic, a carpenter, to assisting a sewage disposal operator. Chain of Lakes is one of our 14 parks where the property's annual revenue exceeds its expenses.
Thanks, Mike. So, since the last time I appeared before you before a budget session, we've had a number of successes, and I'd like to cover a few of those highlights before we wrap up. As we all know, recently the governor announced as part of his agenda a Next Level Trails program where DNR is going to have the good fortune of administering about $90 million towards the development of trails on a local and regional basis. The eligible applicants will be local units of government as well as 501c3s, and we hope to initiate that program here, if not later this month, sometime in January, and we're pretty excited about that. I may have talked last time about what was then the in lieu fee program that was under development. Well, we launched it this past fall. After 5 years in the making, working with INDOT, IDEM, the Army Corps of Engineers, the program, which is now known as the Indiana Stream and Wetlands Mitigation Program, is now in operation. The program is designed to make it easier for INDOT and other developers whose projects impact streams and wetlands to make it through the mitigation process, which is part of, which is required anytime you are going to impact one of those environments. Since launching it in September, we have already sold about $1.7 million in early credits. We have about $380,000 in invoices outstanding and $800,000 in early permitting stages right now. So the program, as I think it was eagerly anticipated by those who make use of it, seems to have taken off, hit the road running, so to speak. We have talked in the past about the importance of weather when it comes to attendance at our properties. We had another, what I consider favorable weather season this past season. To give you an idea, we had over the July 4th weekend, which is one of our big ones, we had 3 properties over that weekend that generated over $100,000 in revenue just over that weekend. Dunes, Patoka, and Brookville. And that's a significant weekend, believe me. For the 10th year in a row, our Division of Forestry has been certified as sustainable by the Forestry, Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which is an organization that certifies management practices based upon North American standards, and the Forestry Stewardship Council, which certifies programs based upon international standards. To be certified, there are 300 different standards that need to be met, and we're very proud that we have met those standards for 10 years in a row now. We had some significant openings recently. We had a Dunes Bird Tower, which is now in full operation over on one of our bluffs overseeing Lake Michigan at our Indiana Dunes State Park. We dedicated a new cabin at McCormick's Creek. It's called the Lukenmeyer Cabin. It's the Lukenmeyer family have been coming there for 70 years and decided they wanted to give back. So they essentially funded this cabin, which is the crown jewel in our system now. It's quite a cabin, and it's 2-story, 3-bedroom, all the amenities you could ask for. We opened a new beach at Wabache State Park. That was done to essentially give water opportunities to those who want to swim, due to the fact that we closed an aging and pool system that was costing more money than it was generating in revenue. Very successful in-house project that has been very well received. And since we were here last, opened 2 new modern shooting ranges, one at Willow Slough and one at Deer Creek. And we were provided, I think, in the last budget session, money to reopen Wyandotte Cave, and over the last 2 years, we've seen about 5,000 visitors, and it's generated about $50,000 in revenue. So those are some of the highlights since I was last before you. And Mike and I, or any of our other exec team, are here to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I had questions about the benevolence fund. I know when we started that, but are you actually spending all of that in the benevolence fund?
I believe we are. Steve, do you have an update on that at all?
We're spending all of it so far. Last year, there was one vendor that did just last year we spent all.
Well, I assume in the beginning it was it needed kind of a jump start to kind of market it, and so you're kind of there now?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Second question I have is, you guys are pretty notorious for coming up with some capital projects. And so just, what do you see as capital projects coming down this year?
I believe that's still kind of a work in progress right now, at least on the state budget agency side. I believe they're anticipating or awaiting the revenue forecast here in a couple of weeks to solidify the actual requests. We're hoping to kind of maintain our current capital program somewhere in the neighborhood between $30 and $40 million on the biannual basis. We primarily use that money to kind of dig into our deferred maintenance that is discussed on a regular basis, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Senator Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the fish hatchery tour this summer. Very interesting. The Department of Corrections, people who helped, is there any program in place where they, for some of that work, it sounded pretty specific and technical, do they get a certification or anything in that process?
I think through the state's Department of Labor, I think there is an apprenticeship program that they do receive certificates and for that
When they're
work.
working for you?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And then, I mean, it's minor, but it is about a 25% growth. I think I did the math real quick, maybe more than that, of your fees. But did you also receive increased participation? I mean, of your revenue growth. Did you also see participation increase besides just revenue growth because you increased the fees?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand that question.
Did more people
Senator.
come to the parks? I know they're paying more, but did more
Yeah,
people come as well?
I believe this last fiscal year, our approximate calculation for visitation is a little over 17 million. Previous history was in about the $16 million or 16 million visitation category.
So it's going
there's
up.
been a little bit of a growth, yes.
So not a deterrent, the increased fees?
No.
Right, okay. And then I assume you look at out-of-state fees and what you should, other state systems and what they're charging out-of-state to stay competitive? Because that seems pretty modest for someone out-of-state who's not contributing
I
otherwise.
think a couple of our neighboring states, it's all funded by the general fund. They don't even charge gate fees.
Okay, let's just
Right.
move on from that. And then, with respect to the next level trails and the $90 million, so who's actually going to set the parameters and be the decision maker for that?
Yeah, the process of the program is still in the works. We, DNR, administer other trail programs, primarily through some available federal funds. So we have a sort of an outline that we're working from to create this system. So basically, an eligible applicant, will be submitting an application for funds. It will be a competitive process. From a evaluation, fact-finding process, the DNR staff will take it from there. But from the, just make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And from that point, once a set of applications are eligible, ready to go, there will be a process where they will be evaluated based for essentially a scoring process. And the team of who will be evaluating that is still being decided upon.
Okay, so I'm in the Fort Wayne Allen County. We have a lot of trails, but a lot of them are within the city, urban trails, I would say. But some are leading to our local parks and things like that, and hopefully, all the way up to Pokane, et cetera. But, so where would people in my district, for example, find out this, I mean, does it have to go to or through a state park? When is that all gonna be decided? Or are you just layering a federal program to match?
No, there's going to be essentially two categories for applicants to reach into. One is if their trail is one of what I would describe as regionally significant, meaning it connects communities or counties or fills in a gap of one of the major trails around the state. Those applications will be evaluated on a somewhat different set of criteria. Then there is another pot, if you will, for trails that are locally significant, that may be a loop trail in a park or through an urban area, something like that. So that is all going to be outlined in a guideline that we are putting together that is going to be in electronic form. We're putting together a website as well that people can go to learn more about the process. But equally as important is that we'll have a bit of what I'll describe as a road show that we, DNR, are going to put on in the north, central, and southern parts of the state very soon, right after launch of the program, to get stakeholders to come and sit down, hear how the program's going to work, what's expected, and to field questions. And questions then will be documented in a section on the website as a frequently asked questions portion of the website. So what we're really going to focus on is education, 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 to make it as easy as possible for people to understand the what and whens and wheres they need to know to successfully apply into this program.
Okay, I appreciate that. Sounds like there's a lot of work and some expense to get this rolling. I guess my one concern or caveat is we have a lot of trails on the planning deck, so to speak, that have funding potential or long-term funding is in the works. And sometimes they are postponed or not. For example, they're going to coincide with the new widening of the road or when the park is open, whatever. I guess my concern would be, do the more fiscally conservative, those who have a long-term plan, already have it funded or a plan to fund it, versus those who have a great, significant, regionally significant trail on their blackboard, but never had the wherewithal or guts to fund it? I mean, how is that going to play into it? So those of us who have been slowly working our way, or those of us who have the pie in the sky and just have never done that, I mean, it may be not at their fault, but is that going to be one of the parameters on how that's going to be
Yes, in two ways.
scored?
We realize that there are some people who may not be prepared to submit an application right away. So this program is going to be, or the funds are going to be administered in rounds. So if you're not ready to apply right away, there'll be subsequent rounds after that. So people can really work with, the local councils or whatever they need to, whoever they need to work with, to be in a best position to apply. So if you don't get your application in right away, the full $90 million isn't going to disappear on you. The other part of it is that there's criteria being built, standards, if you will, that will be used when determining the fundability of an application. So if somebody has a great pie-in-the-sky idea, but that's all it is, it's probably not going to be scored as high as one where they do have their ducks in a row. They've got the engineering done, or they've got the approval of the local councils. They may have their match ready to go. Those are the ones that are going to be scored the highest.
So these are going to require match, and maintenance will be factored in, their ability to maintain them?
The match is expected to be 20%, and maintenance will be one of the aspects of the application that the applicant is going to have to provide for in their plan. as to how it is they intend to maintain the trail, whether it's a natural surface or a hard surface, not only in, the near term, but in the long term, because various surfaces require different maintenance over different periods of time.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
You said that you're estimating 30 to 40 million over the biennium in capital projects. So this 90 million is not obviously considered a capital project. So where are you coming up with the 90 million?
For the next level trails,
Correct.
that is part of the governor's toll package that he announced that it's going to be coming through NDOT.
But it's my understanding that toll road money has to be spent on roads and transportation. Is trails considered a road project now?
Well, trail development is, in the eyes of the federal government, a transportation initiative. But there are aspects to how that money gets to NDOT and how it gets to essentially DNR that NDOT is working out. And we are the fortunate recipients of the program, but we aren't the determiners of how the money ultimately ends up in our hands. Thank you.
Next up is the Indiana State Police and Superintendent Doug Carter.
I don't see Doc Brown. I thought he might be here. Okay. Well, first of all, good morning. I know this is day 2, so I'll get through this as quickly as I can. I think we prepared at least the thought of a very high-level overview of the ISP. We could spend a lot of time talking about this complex thing, but I certainly won't do that to you. But I'm here today to assure you that even though enforcement officers encounter many challenges in today's changing state and national environment, the ISP continues to be dedicated to our goal of not just providing public safety, but improving public safety in our state and for your constituents. Everyone here is aware that our basic mission is to protect life from all threats, foreign and domestic, and to investigate and deter crimes and to promote roadway safety by upholding the law. But our mission as an enforcement agency becomes more complex each day as we're forced to adapt to a changing society. Changes such as crimes investigated through social media, active shooters, events in schools, churches, public gatherings, cyber crimes against children, heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, and many other dangerous drugs so rampant that officers must carry Narcan to protect themselves and to rescue others. That only names a few of the many challenges we face. Ladies and gentlemen, we have spent the past few years restructuring our efforts toward a more specialized workforce in an effort to provide more effective patrols, investigations, tactics, and intelligence gathering in our effort to become a sustainable statewide resource to the citizens of Indiana and to every community. To give you a quick overview of some of the successes over the past biennium, a stat sheet was prepared, which you should have in front of you, titled the Indiana State Police Strategic Overview 2017 and 2018. Throughout my handout, I'll refer to some pages that you might want to reference as I'm going through this for the next couple of minutes. But before I begin my presentation, I'd like to thank all of you for the significant salary increase that enforcement officers received in this current biennium. Words tend to escape me when I talk about what that did for us and for our agency, from recruiting to minority recruiting to retention, the way in which we keep our folks, a long-term strategy so that they don't jump ship and go someplace else, but also encouraging them that they're always going to have to give way more than they'll ever receive, even though you all provided them nearly a 24% increase across the board. I've heard so many stories over the course of these last couple of years, and how that's affected families. And please know that it's not lost on almost 1,300 troopers around Indiana how kind you were and what you did for them. Next, what I'd like to do is focus on the areas that are impacting change within the ISP. And I'd like to start with our new strategy that has helped us evolve as our society changes. I hope that's what you expect of me and expect of us. The All Crimes Policing Initiative is an officer awareness strategy designed to increase an officer's likelihood of recognizing and uncovering concealed criminal activity. All Crimes Policing program goals and curriculum include educating and motivating officers to look beyond the lawful engagement when suspicious circumstances are observed. Build a foundation of well-trained and experienced frontline officers capable of identifying criminal or concealed criminal activity. To implement advanced interdiction techniques designed to develop officers and provide them with the skill set to identify and disrupt major criminal activity. To increase highway interdiction of major trafficking organizations, specifically those trafficking drugs. And provide officers with a skill set to further roadside criminal investigations. To date, we've trained over 800 troopers in the basic and advanced level concepts of this program. We must know our citizenry and your constituents. Imagine the possibilities. What I mean by that is we have 3 levels, 3 kinds of policing in Indiana. Many of you represent rural Indiana. And the policing that we're responsible for in rural Indiana is very different than that of an urban environment, of which we have. And then we have a combination of the urban and rural, which generally are the contiguous counties around those urban hubs around the state: Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Lake County, Evansville, Richmond, Terre Haute, to name a few. One of the things that I'm most concerned about is our Internet Crimes Against Children and Cyber Crimes Unit, as it's being impacted by technology in ways never imagined even 2 years ago. Our Crimes Against Children unit, which can be found on page 8, 9, and 10 of your handout, consists of detectives who conduct investigations involving the possession and distribution of child pornography and exploitation. Our detectives are seeing an increase in the extremism of both the child pornography being encountered and the activities of the offenders being investigated, arrested, and incarcerated. 10 years ago, it was relatively uncommon to find sadistic child pornography within the collections of offenders. Today, the majority of child pornography collections encountered include sadistic child pornography, the most disgusting images you can possibly imagine. The Cybercrime Unit provides law enforcement officers, all local, state, and federal, assistance in criminal investigations where the use of any type of digital media was used as part of the crime, and today almost all of them are. The unit conducts forensic retrieval of digital evidence. We also have trained digital media recovery specialists who are utilized throughout the state on an as-needed basis to conduct on-scene computer previews. Over the last decade, there has been a large increase in both the amount of data requiring examination during the course of criminal investigations and the complexity of those very cases. The Cybercrime Unit has worked to deploy cutting-edge technology to forensically recover data from cellular devices. This involves the disassembly of the cellular device, desoldering or milling of the memory chip from the motherboard, and extraction of the binary code from the memory chip. The Cybercrime Unit is one of the very few public sector groups outside of the federal government that has this capability. School safety and safety involving businesses, churches, and the like. We developed an unarmed response to an active shooter training program back in 2013, and I've talked about it every other year that I've had the pleasure and honor of being with you. In our training, we have transitioned from the traditional run, hide, fight model that you have most likely heard about to a model of prevention, escape, lockdown, and fight. Our training has been utilized across the nation to increase the safety and security of our citizenry. And whenever I talk about this, I always have to tell you how sorry I am that we even have to do it. But the reality of today is we have no other option. Since the inception of this internationally recognized training program, nearly 1,200 unarmed response to an active shooter programs have been presented to Indiana schools, churches, daycare centers, government centers, law offices, and other public gatherings. I'd like to remind you that when we created this curriculum, it was nowhere in America. We didn't have the unarmed response to the active shooter. We, as a law enforcement agency and agencies all over the nation, changed after Columbine in 1999, but we changed in the way in which we responded, but we didn't do a very good job of identifying teachers and administrators and students and employees and the like about what they do, what you would do in the event you found yourself in that position. So that's why the curriculum was established. Dr. Rich Hogue is on staff with me and has just been incredibly instrumental in maintaining not just the status quo, but taking us to a whole new place. 516 programs have been completed in the last 12 months, serving 25,315 Hoosiers. We also work with the Department of Education to train school safety specialists. As you know, each school corporation must have a trained school safety specialist, and the ISP has served as presenters at the Indiana School Safety Specialist Academy for the last 3 years to train these school safety specialists. 3,500 school resource officers, law enforcement officers, and school safety specialists have attended ISP training. Our laboratories, on page 2 and 3 of the handout that you have in front of you, again, a very, very sincere thank you for what you have allowed us to do to this point. I'm excited about what the future might hold. And as a reminder, the ISP laboratory serves every police agency in Indiana with the exception of Indianapolis, the IMPD, and those police agencies within the county of Marion. But we have a very, very, very close working relationship with them. So the laboratory is the tip of the spear for the ISP. It has been since our inception, and it will continue to be in the future, in large part because what you are allowing us to do, if you'll allow me to explain. The division operates 4 forensic laboratories and provides forensic services to federal, state, county, and local agencies. They currently are located in Indianapolis, Lowell, Fort Wayne, and Evansville. ISP previously identified the need for capital improvements at 3 of the regional laboratory facilities, which resulted in the General Assembly allocating funds in the current biennium. An independent needs assessment was completed by a forensic architectural firm and confirmed the need for capital improvements at Evansville, Fort Wayne, and Lowell, again, our regional labs. The needs assessment also determined that the long-term value solution will be to build 3 new standalone combined laboratory district facilities. Construction of Lowell and Fort Wayne laboratory facilities are to begin in 2019, and we're well on target to start the construction this next spring. The new laboratory prototype is to be designed to have a new district facility which uses shared functions within the laboratory system. Once fully vacated, the old existing buildings would be available for a full conversion to evidence storage facilities. Additional funds needed to build the 3rd combined post-laboratory facility on existing property in Evansville will be requested in FY 2021. This laboratory partnership with each of you in the General Assembly should rest in as an example of what can be accomplished through a collaborative and spirit of service. I so appreciate that, and thanks to each and every one of you. A special thanks to Jason Dudich, Leslie Crane, and Brian Renner for your incredible patience with a guy like me. Changes are also occurring in our drug enforcement section, page 4, 5, and 6 of your handout. DES investigates drug-related crimes within the ISP all over Indiana. Its primary mission is the detection, investigation, and successful prosecution of drug trafficking organizations and narcotics-related offenses. Indiana's drug problem is severe and multifaceted, and the role of DES in Indiana communities has never, ever been greater. In recent years, Indiana has seen an exponential increase in opioid abuse, primarily prescription drugs and heroin. The Indiana State Department of Health has reported the number of Hoosier opioid-related overdose deaths increased 74% from 2014 to 2016. The increase represents a change in the opioid mortality rate of 6.9 deaths per 100,000 Indiana residents in 2014 to 11.8 deaths per 100,000 residents in 2016. One other interesting facet about Indiana's drug problem is that in 2017, for the first time, more methamphetamine samples were submitted to the ISP labs than that of marijuana. Our method of operation is consistently evaluated and adjusted to meet the ever-changing demands of combating the illegal drug trade in Indiana. I'd like to add, I never had any idea what addiction was doing to your local communities and mine. But I've come to find out those folks that are becoming addicted aren't bad people, the vast majority of them. But what's happened to them over time is their brain can't tell them no. So it's changed the way we, as the ISP, has reacted and responded to local communities. And I think what you should expect of us is to go after these people feeding this drug to those communities with aggression like never before, obviously within the boundaries of law, and that's exactly what we'll do. We have a nationally recognized Commercial Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division, which is on page 11 of your handout. The Indiana State Police is the only law enforcement agency in the state certified to enforce federal regulations on commercial motor vehicles. Some examples: roadside safety inspections of what they do, compliance review audits, school bus annual inspections, hazardous material enforcement, post-crash investigation, which involves CMVs, to only name a few. They're highly technical. We're also tasked with sending instructors to other state and local agencies throughout the nation. We've been nationally recognized for our efforts towards commercial vehicle safety, but there's still a lot for us to do and a lot that you should expect for us to do. You have placed a significant investment in the infrastructure of Indiana roadways. My job is to do all that I can do to protect that investment. And we must change and evolve in the way we protect the investment in Indiana's infrastructure that each of you have invested in. And we know that enforcement brings safety to the motoring public, compliance with Indiana law, and a robust network to protect that very infrastructure. We have been tasked by the administration to come up with a very robust long-term strategy associated with how we do that. How do we staff our current way stations, what that might look like. We try currently to keep them staffed between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, but we just simply do not have the staffing to keep them active for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over Indiana. But we'll continue to work towards it. We have 8 stations and currently 20 people that man those very stations. ISP training, we've evolved over time significantly, because society is changing. We cannot continue to do what we've always done and expect a different outcome. And we challenge ourselves internally and externally almost all the time. We'll have 55 new troopers graduate from the ISP Academy next Thursday, a week from Thursday. And each of them have been through about 1,000 hours of instruction into the 22-week academy. We certainly are not doing things like we've always done. And I hope that you don't expect us to. In closing, the ISP operating budget request for FY20 is $158.4 million. FY21 is $159.5. 90% of those dollars are personal services, salary and fringe. 10% are other operating, utilities, fuel, supplies, and equipment. I believe that will supply the operational needs of the ISP over the course of the biennium, and I really appreciate the partnership that we have the state budget to establish these numbers. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for your continued support you have shown to us. We know that you share our goal to make Indiana a safer place to live, work, and visit, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I must say that I'm a little bit disappointed. I heard that Doc Brown was here yesterday, and I don't get to see him today. I'll look forward to seeing him back in the hallways. Several members of my staff are with me. I'm not going to take the time to introduce them. I told them that. I don't mean any disrespect by that, but if you do ask them, they'll certainly jump forward and introduce themselves and do our very best to answer your questions. Now I'll shut up.
Thank you. First of all, I want to commend you on the work you've done. I mean, you are all over the state. You take it seriously. Every event that happens across the state, you're there. You don't just work here in your central office. So I commend you for that. And I also want to comment on the positive attitude I see in the local posts since you've been in charge. I think you have a very positive attitude at the local level, and I think it starts at the top. So I just want to commend you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Brown.
I'm going to echo that. I've been able to go to our local post, and I'm sure they're looking forward to the new lab coming online soon. So we need it because, that's my question, the average case turnaround time has expanded, but I know we, the legislature, gave you a responsibility to expand the cases, the kits you were going to examine. So is that a reason for the longer turnaround time from submission to completion?
Specifically, Senator, what discipline are you referencing? I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the average from, in your labs, the cases that are still open? I thought that was the backlog of cases in your labs that haven't been. Are those the kits, or is that also with DNA, or is that,
Steve Holland commands all 4 labs, and on the DS, we do the best one of those.
okay, thanks.
Ma'am, to answer your question, I really need to break it down because historically, we have yearly calculated an average turnaround time, but we're under such an anomaly now with respect to our drug unit that overshadows, to include that and with the other disciplines that we have, such as biology, trace, firearms, latent prints, would be doing a disservice to all the other units because 80% of our backlog now is in our drug unit.
Oh, okay.
And so our other disciplines are doing really well. We have a goal of 90% of our cases completed within 45 days. If I include the drug unit status right now, it just completely, does not paint a clear picture of where we are.
Okay, that makes me feel much better. I thought this was DNA, sexual
No,
assault kits.
no.
Okay, okay, that's,
Specifically, our drug unit is struggling. We're not immune to the opioid crisis. And as you heard the superintendent talk about methamphetamine for the first time overtaking marijuana. And we've also had some legislative hurdles to have to cross on testing with respect to the additional thresholds that were added through the 2014 recodification that caused a two-pronged issue for us. One, we're receiving more samples to test, and on those samples we are receiving in our drug unit, we're having to test more of them to reach certain various weight thresholds. So that's impacted our production, so to speak, because it slowed us down. But,
Okay.
But I will not. It would not be fair to categorize our entire turnaround time as being bad because it's just specifically really our drug unit that's struggling.
okay. I have one more question for you, then, since you're sitting there with lab, and then superintendent. With respect to, you mentioned now meth is taken over marijuana. On a side note, though, since the legislature passed the CBD oil bill last year, I have received numerous concerns, complaints, inquiries from citizens in my neck of the woods. Students testing positive in random drug screening in schools and facing disciplinary action, people losing their jobs, and all buying apparently from grocery stores, legal institutions, retailers, legal CBD oil products. Now, my understanding is, and I haven't done a deep, is that this would be, the oversight of this is not the state police, maybe excise, but I'm understanding that it is a complaint-driven. And complaint-driven, in other words, if someone were called and asked, but those materials would ultimately go to your labs to be tested, is that right?
That is not correct. No, we do not do quantification analysis, so we do not have the ability to tell you that CBD oil has 4%, 3% content. Historically, the Indiana statutes have, for drug enforcement and for our particular laboratory needs, pure or adulterated is the key phrase. So so it doesn't really matter per se how much percent of cocaine is in the sample as long as cocaine is there. So we've never had the need to do quantifications on these percentages. With respect to people using the CBD, that would be a toxicology matter, and the state police laboratories are not in the toxicology science. We have the Indiana Department of Toxicology, which is separate from the state police laboratory, that is the toxicology agency for the state.
So they're not capable of assessing the level of degree?
The state police lab is not.
Right, so if someone has THC in their CBD, which is legal, 0.3%, if someone has that, do you detect it or not?
We can tell, if asked, we could say that it tests positive for THC, but we could not tell you the percentage of what that is.
Right, but can you even, if someone takes, do you even know if someone takes 0.3 or less? Because this is becoming, I mean, and then if you go to people who are on probation or whatever, and they're supposed to be clean, and then they test positive, and these are people using oils and lotions or whatever they're using, right?
No,
So,
we do not test for percentages.
Right, but if someone has it, do you even know if they would test positive on your screen?
If someone's,
If someone took CBD 0.3% or less, do you even know if it would test positive if you stopped them and tested them to see if it was present or not?
yes, we could test for the presence of THC, just not the percentage content.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's gonna be a big problem. Thank you very much. All right, I just had, I can find the last question.
Senator Brown, just remember, these are budget-related questions. I mean, if,
I appreciate that, Senator, but I'm concerned because if our labs are, and our law enforcement are supposed to be making sure that the products that we said are legal are actually legal, because parents are allowing their children to use things that are legal and no one is testing them in the retailers, and they're not, that's no one's responsibility, but that's a huge cost, and then these people, like this student, are facing significant consequences, and that's something we've done, and there's no way for them to know they're doing the right thing. So I
Senator, as it's-
appreciate it. I know I got a little bit,
As it's currently written, but remember, most of that discussion had to do with civil process, not criminal process. So this is, I guess, a byproduct that will just have to continue to be discussed, but we focus specifically on criminal violation in our laboratories.
right, unless it is considered a crime when you're supposed to be clean, but, okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Senator Taylor.
I also want to commend the state commissioner, is that what, superintendent? When we talk like this, yeah, we've established that kind of relationship. I want to commend you. We talked about diversifying your state trooper pool, and without any notice or all, I look up and there's 2 or 3 of your troopers at Sunday services at churches, minority churches in the community, talking about recruiting state troopers. And that's the kind of action that I think a lot of departments, if they want to diversify, can take heed from what you did. And I don't know how many are going to be in this recruiting class, but if your efforts are any reflection of what, then I'm sure this class is going to be diverse. So thank you for doing that. That was a great move on your part, taking the advice of people and sending your troopers to churches in the minority community saying, hey, we want to recruit some troopers of color. So
Matters
thank
so
you.
very much to me, Senator, and while we had some success this year, we expect more success next and even more the year after that. So
Well,
it's a process for us. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I want to commend you. As part of your budget, though, I didn't see anything. While we've seen the opioid crisis, we've seen everything else, I didn't see anything in here about the increase that we've seen in hate crimes across the state and across the country. Your officers end up as first responders on the scene to activities that are seeing a heck of an increase in the state of Indiana. So much that the governor has put hate crimes as part of his agenda. But I don't see anything here, and you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you, in your training, you have approximately 4 hours of training on hate crimes over a 6-week period. And not only that, you also have a repository where local law enforcement agencies are supposed to 2 times a year, just twice a year, supposed to report the incidents of hate crimes in the state of Indiana. They also are required on a daily basis to report other issues, but the lack of responsiveness to our law has me very questioning how, it actually disturbs me quite a bit. And we haven't given you any tools for local law enforcement to put them in a position where they have to report these things. We all know they're happening on an increasing basis, but for some reason, the law enforcement agencies across the state are not reporting them. What can we do from a budgetary standpoint, or is there something technology-wise where we can help these local law enforcement agencies report these things?
Yeah, I hear you, Senator, loud and clear. And I don't think this is necessarily a budget issue for the ISP. I think that the vast majority of what we do, we're able to absorb within our operating budget and those operating funds that you've given to us. The larger question in context, though, is changing the view of how we do what we do. And Part of that process comes from a requirement of training. Part of that process comes through a relationship with those folks that police in those specific areas. And secondly, for us to continue to do what we do in regards to a combined mechanism by which all criminal reporting, pre- and post-adjudicated crimes, are reported to the ISP. That has to do with firearms background checks and the like, and that list can go on and on and on. But 48 to 50% reporting there is extremely low, but it's better than most states around the country. So there's still much for us to do. I look forward to that partnership. I continue to talk about it. You and I met 3 or 4 years ago about this very issue, and it becomes a topic for me almost everywhere that I go. So there is some attention coming to it. I don't know if now is the time for punitive punishment, particularly associated with the loss of revenue or loss of money. I don't think that's where we are right now, but I do think the importance of training and acknowledgement and awareness are very, very important. I think if we have those three, then over time we'll look back and we'll see tremendous success.
One last question. Do you think that the training that we do right now at your academy is adequate for those officers locally to be able to determine whether or not a scene or a crime, a bias or hate crime has been committed?
Yes, sir. I think initially, remember, most training, especially at the basic level, is about awareness. We don't expect a whole lot of retention for those young officers other than to have the awareness of a multitude of things, not just that, of course, because I mean no disrespect by that. But the true test of compliance comes in the field. And what does that department expect of that officer when they get back? That's where I think we have a tremendous opportunity to do a whole lot better. And you have my commitment as the head of this agency that we will.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Taylor hit on what I was going to discuss. Thank you. Per our conversation, but he did it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you and Major Soros has been doing regarding OPEB. I just want to publicly thank you for your openness and looking at that differently and trying to increase that funded liability. I know that was a big move for the retirees as well as your staff. And I appreciate the efforts that you and your team have been making to address that liability issue. So I just want to publicly thank you for the support in thinking through that and knowing that this will be an issue that we will have to address over time. But a big first step was taken this year for those retirees and trying to reduce that liability. So I just want to publicly thank you and Major Soros and the retirees for your patience in looking at that and working on ways to reduce that unfunded liability. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
School for the Deaf, Dr. Giesland. All right, whenever you're ready.
Thank you for acknowledging my tie. Yes, it's orange. So I will go ahead and begin with my remarks. I do want to talk about what makes Indiana School for the Deaf unique. We are one of the top deaf schools in the nation. And I'd like to share a story that helps you have a bigger picture of why that is. There was a third grade student that was deaf that was in the public school and was really struggling and transferred to Indiana School for the Deaf. On the first day in class, she had a seat in class, and I could see that she was observing everything that was happening in the classroom. The students are set in a semicircle in our classrooms, just as you are now, so that deaf students have visual access to whomever was speaking. So, for example, if Senator Taylor is looking across the room, he can see any other member of the committee that would be speaking. That's how we set our classrooms for deaf students. So the student was was quiet throughout the entirety of the day. As the day proceeded, the teacher asked if the student had any questions or comments, and the student stayed extremely quiet all morning. At lunchtime, the student was alone. They didn't know anyone. They were very nervous. The teacher saw that and went over to sit with the student at lunch and had a conversation with the student. They were able to communicate and have a conversation using American Sign Language. The student returned back to class and remained quiet for the entirety of the afternoon. The teacher was a phenomenal teacher, and of course, at the end of the day, listed the homework assignment on the board and checked in with the students to make sure that they knew what was assigned. At the end of the day, that student finally raised their hand, and the teacher was very excited to hear from the student finally. The student stood up, and normally the students would just sit there and address the class, but the student chose to stand and address the class and said, "I just want to say that I understood everything that happened all day today," and said it repeatedly. "I understood everything that was said today." And the third grade students, of course, bless their hearts, they didn't really even understand what the student's issue was. But the teacher recognized, oh, you were able to listen in on side conversations. You were able to engage and see what conversations were happening around you in the cafeteria that typically our hard of hearing students or deaf students don't have access to in the public school. They could see what was happening and what was being talked about in the hallways. They had access all day long. So that opportunity for those social interactions and language opportunities that student had tells me why we have Indiana School for the Deaf here in the state of Indiana. It's so that we can meet each and every deaf child's needs. So we do have a legal continuum of services that are offered to deaf students that range from the public school all the way to the deaf school. And we have to look at each individual child's need and make sure that we are able to accommodate for those needs. So this child felt that sense of belonging. They were able to excel and thrive in our environment. And that is our current tagline at Indiana School for the Deaf, to belong, excel, and thrive. Has anyone had the opportunity to visit Indiana School for the Deaf before? Okay, fantastic. If you have not been out, please do make time to come visit the deaf school. It's a phenomenal environment, and I think you would learn a lot from the learning environment that you would see there. We're not just educating students, but as we do so, we set our classrooms with LCD projectors. As you can imagine, in the public school, students read aloud, and all of their peers look down at the text and listen along as people read along. If you can imagine a deaf child in the public school trying to track the passage and then also watch an interpreter, that is not possible. They miss information. So at our school, we have LCD projectors that allow the passage to be displayed on the wall, on the screen, so that the teacher can stand next to the passage, and all of the students have their eyes on the passage and the teacher at the same time. And they can look through the language choices that are used in the passage and discuss that. So this is a deaf-centered style of learning that we use at Indiana School for the Deaf. We currently have 352 students. Of those 352 students, 72% of those students have additional disabilities. So they are deaf students with possibly ADHD, they could have vision issues, they may have any other disability. So that's the challenge of our teaching today. Not only that, but of that 72%, 62% of those students have a third disability. And that is an extreme challenge. to educating our children today. I'm sure you're all familiar with the ISTEP testing in math and language arts. The average passing rate for our general population is a 54% for our general population of students. Special education students are currently performing at only a 17% passing rate. At Indiana School for the Deaf, our students are passing at a 34% rate, which is double of what the general special ed population is passing at. Of course, we have the passion and we want to excel quite higher than that. It doesn't matter if our students are deaf or hearing, we expect them to excel at the rate that they should be. I'm proud to tell you that of our sophomore class from 2 years ago, when they initially took ISTEP testing, their percentage was 34%. However, by the time that they were graduating seniors, 92% of our students passed ISTEP, which is a phenomenal accomplishment. I also want to share a story about our school board member. You may know her. Her name is Dr. Lucy Whitty. She was a special ed director in the public school for Wayne Township, and she is currently retired. She shared a story with me that I would like to share with you as well. She was elected by former Governor Mitch Daniels. She was chosen to be a member of our school board, and he directed her to be a part of our school board and help improve Indiana School for the Deaf, that was the mission he was tasking her with. She did a phenomenal job as part of our school board. She helped find funding to help support a program review, which allowed for a lot of recommendations that were made. We have put all of these recommendations into practice, and we have been working diligently with our staff to do this and to improve our teaching strategies. The results have been outstanding. And I know that Ms. Whitty is very proud of the work that we have been doing. And that is one of the reasons that we are one of the top deaf schools in the nation. Our students do participate in a National Academic Bowl competition. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. So it's similar to the brain game. It's a national competition, and the students compete in areas of academics, social studies, language arts, mathematics, etc. The deaf students are competing against other deaf programs, whether they be mainstream programs or residential schools. We are second running national championships in the Academic Bowl. We also have a Math Counts competition that our students participate in, which again is against other programs that serve deaf and hard of hearing students. Our students ranked 4th in the nation in that. Of course, we're working towards getting that national award. We also have our students participate in a literacy competition, which is called Battle of the Books. It is a national level competition as well, and we placed 3rd in the nation. We are often looking for grants to help with our nutrition program for our students. We were part of a particular grant that was through Team 8, and that was funded by the Cal Ripken Jr. Foundation. And we were able to acquire that grant. They came into our school and provided new services. They renovated our weight room for our students, and so we really benefited from that opportunity. We have been educating our deaf students at Indiana School for the Deaf for 175 years, and we are still thriving. And that is because we are an innovative school, and we are really always referring back to Governor Holcomb's well-known words. He emphasizes the 3 H's, probably because of his last name. The honesty of Hoosiers, that we value honesty and we focus on the problems and we work diligently to resolve those problems so that we can improve the education of our children. We are humble. We are one of the top deaf schools in the nation. We don't have to to advertise that. Our work shows that. And lastly, we are hungry. We want to work more towards providing nothing but the best for our deaf children. And so we ask for the best out of you as well so that you can support our endeavor. Want to say thank you to the state budget agency for working so diligently over the last couple of years to increase our residential mentors' salary. They are dorm supervisors who work first, second, and third shifts. We've always struggled with retention and filling of those positions. With the change of salary increase that they received, it was a big jump from $9 an hour to $14 an hour. We finally had a nice range of applicants so that we could choose the best individuals to serve our students. Our retention has risen considerably, and we have been able to improve our dorm services for our students because of that. So thank you so much for your support. That concludes my information about the Indiana School for the Deaf. And at this time, I will turn it over to Jeremy Hawk so that he can share information about our budget request.
Real quick, I just wanted to talk about our current levels for our budgets. As you can see, in this fiscal year, for personal services, we're just under $14 million, with other operating a little over $2.2 million. And going forward, we're keeping that pretty simple. We've worked with SBA to give a small increase for personal services to play catch up for the governor's pay for performance salary increases over the past few years, and to keep our other operating expenses relatively flat. So as you can see, we have a very simple budget, and we work really hard to stay within that while providing our students with every opportunity that we can at our school. And I believe that concludes our presentation.
Of course, we're open to any questions you may have.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Quick questions. How many students, if you know, are in the statewide who have hearing impairments?
There are approximately 2,400 students, give or take, but that's an approximate number.
Okay. And then with respect to your campus of the 250 staff members, how many of those staff members are directly educating? They are the educators as opposed to the boilers and the maintenance and groundskeepers and things?
We have around 70 staff members.
70 educators, essentially, I'm going to call them. 70 of the 250 are educators.
Yes, we do service our students for 24 hours because we do have 3 shifts, which is quite different than the public school where they only cover their students for 1 shift. We actually service our students for 24 hours since they stay in the dorm.
Right, 80 of them. Okay. And then I'm curious, have any school systems reached out to you since obviously you have 352 students, but that's pre-K, so I don't know if you really know pre-K who have hearing impairments, but of the 2,400 you're aware of, have any of those school systems reached out to you for best practices, curriculum, et cetera?
Yes, the Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Education is an agency that is responsible for providing outreach and training to public schools. That used to be charged as ISD's responsibility, but that is a separation that happened. So now the Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Education handles that, and they provide that technical assistance.
Okay, so you don't?
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Next is the Indiana School for the Blind, Jim Durst.
Thank you. Support services and labor services for us when our students are not on campus. We have a foundation that has significantly assisted us financially in meeting some of the extra cost demands. We established a program at Miami Correctional Facility about 10 years ago where we have approximately 40 individuals who are transcribing accessible files into print, braille, and also reusable accessible files for our students. That saves us in excess of $500,000 a year. We are fortunate to be one of 6 statewide projects for the Indiana Lions. We work closely again with some of the other collaborative efforts with the Indiana Department of Education, Butler University, and the other agencies that you can see on the PowerPoint. Our goals are to continue to deliver effective programming in a cost-effective manner, improve transition services from school to employment. We are always dealing with a significant issue. Approximately 70% of individuals who are blind or have low vision are underemployed or unemployed. And our goal is to continue to make strides in that alarming statistic. Our goal is to continue to deliver the core curriculum. We are a public school like every other public school in the state. And the other thing that we have as an immediate goal is to continue to expand the expanded core curriculum, which is the vision-specific goals for students, orientation, mobility, braille, assistive technology, and those kinds of things. We plan to pursue our ongoing cost efficiencies by, again, continuing to scrutinize our vacant positions and reallocating existence resources to better meet our mission and strategic plan. We plan to examine and implement energy and other cost-saving initiatives, continue again to share resources with the Indiana School for the Deaf and other state agencies, and collaborate with other agencies, businesses, and service providers. And certainly want to expand our outreach services and provide more services locally. And we want to continue to implement our strategic facilities master plan to move our much needed sources of direct student services to the center of our campus and our ancillary services further out on the periphery. And we want to improve our stakeholder input and responsiveness. And recently, the Braille code that was in place for, probably 100 years changed to the Unified English Braille Code. I'm very pleased to say that the School for the Blind in the state of Indiana jumped on board with that transition to UEB in a very strategic process. All of our teachers are trained in the new UEB code. We've been working closely with the Department of Education to transition all the high stakes testing for our students from English Braille American Edition to UEB. The rest of the things you have in your handout, graphs that basically address our current student population, handicapping conditions, where students are located in terms of residence away from the school and those kinds of things. From a budget perspective, based on our historical perspective, our expenditures over the last 2 years were roughly $10,863,000. Our base going into the new biennium would be $10,860,000 and some change. We are also requesting a 3.3% increase to cover those expenditures such as health, salary increases and whatnot that we have been able to cover in our current budget and previous budgets. And we are also requesting a change package of $229,000 to hire resource officers and provide our own security at the school. Currently, we do not have a resource officer on campus. We hire Securitas, a private agency that provides services for us from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 o'clock in the morning and on weekends. Are there any questions I might answer for you?
Yeah, Jim, I know you and Doc and I have discussed the need to maybe merge the two campuses to reduce maintenance costs and be more efficient. And we were going to form a committee to kind of look at some of the options. I know there's some concerns about that. I mean, do you care to share any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I'll be happy to, and thank you for that opportunity. You know, there are currently 41 schools for the blind in the country. There are about 3 dual schools in the country right now. I previously came from a dual school prior to coming to Indiana. I think it behooves us, you know, as we continue to look at educating opportunities for kids. And, you know, one of the things that continues to come up is we are both dealing with significantly aging architecture and whatnot. And while we are very pleased to have the campuses that we have, you as budget committee members certainly are aware of what we request on a biennium basis in terms of capital projects, so on and so forth. I think it would behoove us to certainly look at doing a study, look at coming up with best practices, looking at sharing resources. One of the things that frequently occurs when individuals look at combining schools, and it's been looked at many times here in Indiana, it's been looked at in other states across the country. And one of the frequent misconceptions is if we combine the schools, we will save one of the budgets. And the reality of it is you cannot educate deaf kids and blind kids together. You can educate them on the same campus. You can share resources, some health services. You can share gymnasiums, some physical structures. But the fact that blind kids cannot hear deaf kids and deaf kids cannot see blind kids sign, that's not a probability. But I think a study is certainly something that should be explored, something that we should have the opportunity to check out and look at opportunities for enhancing both schools through that process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again, and enjoyed our tour of your facility. Mr. Chairman, you've opened up a discussion is in regards to the potential study, which has been looming out there for years. And I thought this was basically a budget presentation. So are we going to begin to debate the cost or whatever for these 2 campuses to move together? Or tell me, I'd like to be enlightened to your private conversations you and Doc have had with the superintendent.
For me, it was about, you know, I understand you can't educate the kids in the same building. I mean, I've kind of learned that. But our thought was we could save money on the overhead of the facilities and maintenance by merging the campuses and having, so we're not duplicating maintenance folks and things like that. So that was what started the discussion, was just the overhead cost that they could share. The question was, you know, do they move to the School of the Blind campus? Do they move to the School of Deaf campus? I mean, or they go to a third location? I mean, those are things I'm not discussing here. The reason I brought it up is because it was a way to maybe cut back on some of the maintenance costs by looking to go down this path.
Thank you. And I'm quite sure it's all concerned to us that, you know, we do leverage the dollars and our return on investment. Both campuses are pretty well-seasoned campuses. And I know that we'll be looking at that. So, you know, I doubt very seriously if it would be moving from, creating a whole new campus. That's just not going to happen. Okay, so that scenario, I don't even conceive it happening. I could see one moving to one or vice versa. And over the discussions, and we've all gone to both campuses, I can feel what the incline will be. And I'm concerned about that. So even though we said this is just the start, but, you know, I'm going to be watching the man behind the curtain, or woman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to echo my colleagues' sentiments, the School for the Deaf, and Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I think I brought this up probably fourth time now. The School for Deaf is located in both of our districts. I think it would only behoove the chairman and the Ways and Means chair to include us in the discussions. We might have, for example, some understanding of what's going on in the local community that could benefit the School for the Deaf or the School for the Blind. Now, I'm not saying, for example, the district where the School for the Blind, that's not my district. But the School for the Deaf is smack dab, it's in my district. And I haven't sat in on any discussion about utilization of facilities in that district. But I do have some input because, or should have some input respectfully, because it is my district. So if you're going to change the scope and the makeup of my district, the only thing I request is just to be a part of those discussions, because I might be able to provide some additional input and some assets to the discussion. So I haven't had no one has contacted my office about combining the two. I did have one meeting with the state fair about parking issues that they have during the state fair. But, you know, I am here every day, so I'm willing to provide as much input and help that I can on the discussions that you're having, so.
Well, Senator Taylor, really hasn't been any secret discussions. The only discussion we've had, most of the discussion we had when we toured the facilities. And then since then, we met one time, and really all we talked about in that discussion was maybe the importance of forming a committee to answer these questions and look into it. So we did not discuss specifics or anything like that. Our discussion was, we think we're to the point we probably should form a committee of the players to look into the options down the road.
That's exactly my point. If you're going to put a committee together, you might want to include the person who represents the physical area, so that if you want someone from the community, I might be able to provide you with that person. I think you should have someone that represents the community, that you're affecting the geographic makeup of that community. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that you're having secret meetings. What I'm saying is, respectfully, if you're going to discuss just one meeting about what we're going to do with the physical makeup of someone's district, I think it would be appropriate to at least inform them of the meeting and at least give them an opportunity to be there. But I'm not the public. I'm a representative of a physical area that you're talking about. Maybe I'm confusing the issue. I always thought it would be just out of just pure respect for the district and the members that represent, that if you're going to have a discussion about something that's going to change the makeup, physical makeup of the district, that you have a discussion with that person representing the district. And that's all I'm saying. That's all I don't think. And I'm not saying you're having meetings. I'm saying if you're going to have them, just make sure to include. Maybe I'm reiterating or beating a dead horse here, but that's all I'm saying. Okay.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Do a great job there. So I tried to write it down. So how many students did you say? I thought you said in the beginning, pre-K through 12th, because you go up to 21, pre-K through 12 in the state of Indiana have some sort of visual impairment?
It's in the transmittal letter as of December 1. It's 900 and approximately 950.
950 students you know of across the state have some sort of visual impairment?
For the December 1 child count that's done by the state, by the Department of Education, yes.
Okay, and so are these students, since I didn't ask before, are these students that also could be tagged, if you will, as having hearing impairments?
No.
They're separate?
Generally not.
Okay. And so of your staff, and I appreciate you're reducing it from 226 to 181 full-time equivalents, of the 181, how many are solely dedicated to educating the students in the classroom, as opposed to, I know you have big problems with your boilers and maintenance and now the
We have
security.
approximately 40 teachers.
40 teachers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the same question I had before, I do think you both do an excellent job, but I just might add, since I am the legislative appointment to your board, that this is a state school. It's not an Indianapolis public school or something local. It serves, both of these serve the state. And so lots of stakeholders would be interested in this. But have any schools also reached out to you for best practices?
Absolutely.
And on a regular basis, I should have asked before, is there, because you're outside of the Department of Ed, so how does the DOE and how do local school districts access curriculum and best practices from you? Is it an ask, or are you automatically disseminating?
We automatically disseminate. One of our goals for the biennium is for us to be the center of excellence for educating kids who are blind or have low vision. We do routinely have, we just finished a fall conference in conjunction with Indiana State for teachers out in the districts. The Indiana Educational Resource Center is housed on our campus. We provide all of the books, materials, supplies, and equipment to all of the blind and low vision kids out in the state through our campus. So we have a very close connection with local schools. And the fact that we did a paradigm shift about 7 to 10 years ago, where we are now providing direct services in the districts. We're serving 318 kids that are enrolled locally. And I think that says an awful lot about districts having faith in the service that we provide, that they want to call upon us to provide that service.
I think that's an excellent paradigm shift. I think these schools are great, but they are 170-some years old, and, back in the day, maybe every school district didn't have the capability, and/or the parents might not have had the capability to keep their children at home. So when you supply education to the 318 students, do the districts compensate you for that?
They do.
Okay,
They
thank
do.
you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Next up, we had a request from Representative Porter. We didn't have time for it at one of the travel meetings, and it was the request that they come discuss the toll road issue. So we put that into for NDOT. So at your request, we're having Jim McGough and Micah Vincent discuss the toll road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Micah Vincent. I'm the director of the Indiana Office of Management and Budget. Also serve, as part of that role, serve as the chairman of the Indiana Finance Authority. You see Dan Hughey listed in your screen, and this is not Dan Hughey, but Dan couldn't be with us today. So Jim McGough from IFA, very involved in toll road throughout the years at Indiana Finance Authority, is with us. We'll walk through Budget Committee update. A lot of this is very similar to the update that we gave to the Roads and Transportation Committee. I believe that was in October, in early October. But we'll walk through the deal points, and be happy to take any questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you're aware, the IFA amended the lease with the Indiana Toll Road Concession Company earlier this year. And prior to discussing the specifics of the amendment, I would like to provide a brief overview of the concession and lease agreement. The concession and lease agreement by and between the Indiana Finance Authority and the Indiana Toll Road Concession Company, LLC, was amended and restated as of July 1st, 2017, and expires in 2081. Prior to the amendment and restatement, over the years, there were 7 other amendments to the lease. Purposes of those to take care of some environmental matters, expansion, as well as the continuation of the IPASS discount. As we all know, the ownership of the Indiana Toll Road is retained by the state of Indiana. The operator's responsibilities are all operations and maintenance activities of the road. They are also required to take care of all upgrades as required to maintain the road pursuant to the same standards as all other state roads. And then the management of all concession systems and revenue collection is also the responsibility of the operator. With respect to the oversight of the lease to assure the compliance, or the operator's compliance with all lease provisions, IFA and NDOT partner on this oversight. IFA primarily responsible for the legal oversight and the operation management as spelled out in the lease agreement, and NDOT with respect to the toll road compliance on the operational matters. NDOT oversight, there is a full-time NDOT employee that is on the road. He resides up in the Gary office of the NDOT's Traffic and Maintenance Center, performs weekly inspections and monthly inspections of the 8 travel plazas. The IFA also contracts with RQAW to provide performance audits of the road. With the lease came a operator manual that is over 200 pages in length that is very detailed on the appropriate operation requirements or operational requirements of the road. And through our NDOT person on the road, as well as the RQAW agreement that we have, performing the audits to assure that the operator is maintaining the road pursuant to the lease agreement. In addition, the operator provides the IFA quarterly and annual reports, some of those listed here on this slide. And finally, there is open and ongoing discussions with the operator on proposed enhancements to improve the toll road experience, especially as enhancements are rolled out in other roadways across the nation. We believe our operator is very good at trying to keep our road up to date and consistent with other national practices as well, which is a good segue to specifically discussing the latest amendment to the lease. 2018 lease amendment provides that the state of Indiana will receive $1 billion over the next 2 years. The IFA understands that the proceeds will be used for transportation-related projects in the 7 toll road counties, thereby freeing up NDOT revenues to be used for the Next Level Connection program. The receipt of the funds, $400 million, was received on October 5th, 2018. The second tranche, $300 million, will be received no later than October 1, 2019, so next year. And then the final disbursement of $300 million will be received no later than October 1 of 2020. The operator is also required to invest an additional $50 million in upgrades to the toll road within the next 3 years that were beyond the scope, or they are accelerating projects that were originally part of their capital improvement plan. In exchange for these payments, the operator is authorized to enact a one-time 35% increase to the toll rates for larger vehicles using the road, specifically 3 axles and above. This does not apply to passenger cars, and future annual adjustments for all tolling categories will continue pursuant to the original terms of the lease. The next slide is a little difficult to read. Hopefully it's a little better on your paper copy, but it provides some of the due diligence the IFA performed when analyzing the lease amendment. Each chart represents one tolling category, so the left is Class 3, the right is Class 4, and the bottom is Class 5, and it compares to some of the toll roads that are in our neighboring states as well as nationally. Because of the use of the letter of credit to guarantee the payments in year 2019 and 2020, it was necessary to negotiate the provisions of the letter of credit, and the Finance Authority thought it was very important to assure that the banks were of a credit quality that would assure delivery of payment to the state in the event that payment was not made by the operator. So the IFA required that it be a draw letter of credit, and also required that in the event of a non-payment, that it would create a default under the lease and would ultimately result in the termination of the lease if payment was not made. Final slide is some specifics with respect to the capital enhancements that are have been made and will continue to be made. They have invested over 500, or the operator has invested over 500 million in capital upgrades on the toll road. The investments to date include the recently completed $220 million project PUSH, which was a rehabilitation of 70 lane miles and 53 bridges. They also completed a $70 million travel plaza. It was a total reconstruct. They eliminated the existing plazas and have put in 8 new travel plazas. Completed $10 million of intelligent transportation system projects across the road. The immediate term, $35 to $40 million, will be distributed for an 87-mile ITS expansion, $10 million for truck parking upgrades, $2 to $3 million for smart truck parking system, and $2 to $3 million for heavy vehicle electric charging stations. And there will be an additional $150 million of pavement and bridges through 2025, and $500 million in capital upgrades. That'll be in addition to the $500 million that has already been deployed. So with that, if there are questions that we can address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the update. And I believe that this whole announcement, I think it just came out in the press release, and really things weren't really discussed publicly with the legislature. Is that correct?
Are you asking if we
Yeah.
followed the process of the lease amendment?
Right, yeah. I mean, major moves was done by the General Assembly, but it seems like, we cut a deal. And that's just why I asked for this to be out here. We came back privately, sub-privately, how you want to frame it, and said, we're going to cut this deal, we're going to do X, Y, Z without no legislative input, and we're supposed to be part of the process. And that's just really disconcerting to me that we were not. We wasn't there when how they were going to use the money. I mean, now we see it, but at one point we knew nothing. It's just like, here, thou shalt take this and be glad.
Sure. So I think the question is on the statutory authority on the lease amendment, which, as you know, comes out of the language of the original statute on the toll road. The original toll road deal from 2006 2007, and in accordance with that, we've made 6 or 7 amendments to the lease since that time.
Okay, I mean, I'm quite sure you have over these years, but, I'll just go back and say it again, because as you went through your presentation, I was doing my notes. I mean, this is a major change in the lease, okay, that we had, as a legislature, we had no input, we processed it. I mean, I didn't. I mean, I had no discussion. I don't know if anybody else had any discussion, from the legislative branch of government. And I find out it's concerning what else is going on that we don't know until we get a press release and say, this is what we're doing. There are 3 branches of government, but, I don't think major moves would have happened without major legislative input.
Thank you, Representative Porter. And I guess to point out the statutory authority that the IFA was following, that Article 15.5 of the Indiana Code is specific for public-private agreements related to the toll road, and 15.5-5.2 of that states that any lease for a toll road must have procedures for amendment, and Section 20.03 of the lease does authorize the lease to be amended by written agreement of both parties. And then in addition, 815.5-7 permits the IFA to fix and revise user fees charged by an operator, including toll rates charged by an operator on the Indiana Toll Road. And in fixing those toll rates, the IFA may establish maximum amounts for user fees and provide for increases or decreases of the user fees. So I guess the statutory authority and the lease authority is what the IFA followed when we went through the procedures of amending the lease.
Okay, I understand the statute, but I'm not going to let you deflect on what's there versus what we are asking in regards to how we're going to spend those dollars. Okay, you can cite it all you want and deflect, but the respectability of what should be happening with us in the General Assembly.
Sure, and so obviously we answered with respect to the authority on the lease amendment itself. The authority on the flow of funds comes out of two particular places within the statutes. The first is, as you know, funds from the toll road deal are to be deposited in the toll road fund, and then they from there move to the major moves construction fund. The budget bill and actually several successive budget bills did provide augmentation authority in the joint major moves construction fund as determined. Additionally, in 8.14.14.7, there is language about distributions from the major moves construction fund into the state highway fund. So those are the two places in statutory authority that deliver the authority for the flow of funds in this case.
Well, I guess we're going to continue to do the Indiana waltz, and we're going to continue to disagree in regards to how this whole process happened. But we're spending $1 billion, and like I said, we were major players at one point as a General Assembly through the legislative branch, and it seems like we're not now. That we get things in press release, or we're asked to be catch up, and I think that's disingenuous as we continue this whole process. So, at this point, it is what it is, but it's duly noted.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
I'll get out of the way. That's fine.
Unless you guys hang out with INDOT. So next up is INDOT and Joe Campbell.
Good. Ready to go? All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this morning. I think it's still morning, right? So we'll get started here real quick and be more than happy to take some questions. Feel free to interrupt me at any point. I'm going to handle some of the operations and what we're doing, capital program and those kind of things at NDOT, and then I'll punt on the revenues and expenditures reports at the end to our CFO, Dan Broussard. So real quick, I'm sure all of you are familiar with NDOT and who we are, but just real quick, 6 district offices around the state of Indiana, obviously central office here in Indianapolis. We have right around 3,600 employees currently that work for Indiana Department of Transportation. Those are full-time staff members. 2/3 of our labor are highway technicians, so those are the men and women that are actually out there on the streets and on the bridges and on the roads, getting a lot of the work done that keeps the flow of traffic around the state of Indiana. Fiscal year 2018, as you can see, a lot of the information there. All of those dollars go to help support our nearly 30,000 miles, road lane miles, around all 92 counties of the state and over 5,700 bridges. Briefly, our goals for fiscal year 19, obviously, is one of the top ones here is deliver great customer service. I'll hit briefly on customer service and what we're doing to accelerate our customer service end of things here in a few slides. Always looking to support any of the other state agencies, particularly when it comes to economic development and creating opportunities for anyone and everyone in businesses around the state of Indiana or those looking at the state to enhance our economic competitiveness. So working closely with IEDC and other agencies on that mission. Execute our 20-year road and bridge plan. I think we've been very transparent over the last year or so since House Enrolled Act 1002 was signed last April by Governor Holcomb and supported by many of you in the room, so thank you for that. But we've been transparent on that, and I'll pull up a map here shortly as well that maybe help you when you're back in your districts and talking and working with your constituents around your districts. Another one that's big for us is developing our 21st century workforce. You can't drive around the state of Indiana anywhere and not see help wanted signs. It doesn't matter what industry it's in, and we are no different than them. And so we are constantly working to develop the next set of folks that are going to work on our highways, and then also take care of the employees that we have, providing them with training opportunities, leadership skills to help further develop their skill set and completing our mission. Some of the projects, these are just 2 or 3 of the highlights around the state of Indiana. Obviously, we have many more than that around. We have roughly 900 to 1,000 projects going on in a construction season around the state. But here's one that recently opened on US 33 up in Goshen, and then the Boonville Bypass down in southern Indiana. I-69 Section 5. I'm certain, regardless of where you're at in the state, you've probably heard about this project. We are very happy to announce that we opened this project back in September, and it is, I just traveled it the other day, it is full interstate speed now. It is up to 70 miles an hour as the posted speed limit, and that went into effect in the 1st of November. Section 6, which is the last section of that leg, which is the Martinsville to the southwest side of Indianapolis, and the 465 connection is the next leg of that. And as you heard an announcement back in the beginning of September with Governor Holcomb that we are going to accelerate that project and shoot for completion of that by the end of 2024 as opposed to 2027. A significant investment of that is on the way, and we have started the process of acquiring right-of-way and properties and all of those kind of things that go into completing that project. The Ohio River Crossing, which is another major project that will be coming in the near future, partnership with Kentucky, again, similar to the Ohio River bridges down and around the Jeffersonville, Louisville area. And we anticipate this end of this week, Friday, is when we will have the draft environmental impact statement ready for publish. Some of the added travel lanes projects that we have around the state, and some of them are near or at completion. I remember starting one. We had a groundbreaking back in March or April of last year up in the Lake County area, Lowell area, and it's about a 12 or 13 mile added travel lane project. And as you can see on the screen, we have several of those around. We have one active right now in Columbus, from Columbus down to Seymour as well on I-65. So local projects. This is, as you can probably imagine, one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, community crossings. Great program. We just did some announcements over the last couple of weeks on the most recent awards for these grants. We awarded $100 million a couple of weeks ago to some communities and counties around the state of Indiana that I believe, I know will have a significant impact in their local communities. This is money that was part of 1002 from last year and provides dollars for locals to use on maintenance and preservation of, as I call it, Main Street, Indiana. These are funds not to be used for state highways, interstates, or U.S. highways. This year we received applications from 444 local agencies around the state of Indiana. We're changing it up a little bit for 2019, calendar year 2019. What we're going to do is we're going to split this into 2 calls for projects. So we'll have the first call for hopefully $100 million. Will be on January 7th of 2019 will be the first call. And then we'll do another call the first part of July of 2019. This is different than in the past. We've always done just 1 call. But after listening to some of our local partners, that sometimes they're not ready when we announce these calls, and they don't know exactly where they're at in their budgeting process because this is a matching grant program, and also listening to some of our contracting friends and partners that dumping $150 to $200 million worth of local projects out on literally out onto the street all at one time can be of a challenge, while they're also in the middle of a construction season on state projects as well. So we've decided to split this in half, and so we'll do the first half will be in January, and then 6 months later we'll do another call for projects. Part of our transparency piece, this is one of the things that I utilize this quite a bit as I travel around the state and speak to different groups, whether it's Chamber of Commerce or an economic development group, Rotaries, whatever it may be. Next Level Roads map. So if you just go to nextlevelroads.com, you can pull up this. It's a Google map based application, and you can pull up any county, any highway in the state of Indiana, including community crossings awards that we have awarded to communities for the next 5 years. And as you can see on the map, there's a bunch of check boxes over on the side. This is also touchscreen, so if you want to, you can pull it up on your iPhone, iPad, whatever. You can click on a specific district if you want to see a project that's going on in a district, or you want to see a project that's going on, maybe a bridge project in 3 years, whatever that may be. You can click or unclick all of whatever you would like on the right-hand side of this map. And then you can really drill down into maybe even your main street going through the community that you live in. And you can find out, it'll give you specific information about that project. When it starts, if it's already started, when we anticipate completion, the budget for that project, and what is it we're actually doing. Is it a mill and overlay? Is it a bridge repair? What is it we're doing? Small projects are on here. Some of them are 100,000 or less. And then major projects that are multi-million-dollar projects are on this website as well. This became live to the public in April of this year. We're very proud of it, and so I would encourage you to take a look at it when you get an opportunity, and also tell your friends and neighbors and folks you run into in your districts that this is available and is a useful tool, so everyone knows what exactly is going on through NDOT and some of our local partners. Another piece of the transparency, and as I mentioned earlier, the customer service, is our new customer service call center. And so we launched this almost a year ago, February of 2018. And what this is before, if you Googled how to contact NDOT because you have a complaint or a concern or something you wanted to report, damaged guardrail, potholes, whatever that may be, you may get a phone number for the Vincennes district and you live in the Fort Wayne district. And when you call the Fort Wayne district, they have no idea what's going on in the Vincennes district. And so what we did is we brought all of that in-house. So it is a one-stop phone number now. It's 855-NDOT4U. And you call that number, you get customer service professionals that are here in the Indianapolis, in our location right across the plaza here. And they'll take your phone call. This is a 24-hour operation, and it is now automated. So you call, you do talk to a human being, but then they process it through a computer and kick it out to the appropriate district as a work item. So this will then hit our highway technicians on the next available work day and let them know that there's a pothole that needs to be repaired or guardrail that's been damaged. We can send folks out there to assess what the issue is. We currently provide over 100 services to Hoosiers and to motorists in the state of Indiana. I've mentioned 2 of them. As I said, there's 98 or more that we provide to Hoosiers. And so this is a much more streamlined opportunity for folks to get in contact with our agency and get their issues addressed. We also have a new mobile app, NDOT Mobile, and so folks can download that. It doesn't matter if you have an Android or an iPhone. It is available. Obviously, it's free, and you can pull up the same information from there. You can also report issues. You can see construction maps on there. You can also pull up in 3 locations around the state of Indiana, northwest Indiana, central Indiana here, and then down around Jeffersonville. We have traffic cameras, and so you see those a lot in the morning. If somebody, local TV stations doing a traffic report, they often use our NDOT cameras. You can pull those up from this app. It does not give you the live stream, but it does give you a screenshot in the last 60 to 90 seconds. So if you want to know why am I stuck in traffic and there may be a camera up ahead and you can pull that up, Obviously, I wouldn't do it unless you're the passenger or if you're stopped in your vehicle. I don't encourage anybody to use their cell phone while they're driving. Safety is obviously our number one mission at NDOT. So, but I would encourage you to check out that app as well. Speaking of customer service and our contacts, as you can see on the map there, we have, roughly over the last few years, 150,000-ish contacts from the public. That number has grown exponentially since we started the new customer service call center. And so we think the next few years that number is going to be significantly higher. So as you can see, roadside is the number one, more so than the roadway. And so a lot of those that we receive are for maintenance of the right-of-way. So that's mowing, that's picking up trash. And I know, because I do correspond with many of the legislators, I know that's a lot of times one of the biggest complaints you all receive. I can tell you, as a former local elected official, I complained often about the maintenance and the mowing of the median on US 31, particularly in the city of Franklin. So my next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to address that in the coming year. So we are significantly ramping up our operations. So, for example, right now, particularly in the urban areas of the state, if you represent those areas, we typically only mow the medians or the rights-of-way twice a year. We are going to accelerate that to 4 to 5 mowings, at least double the amount of mowings, particularly in the urban areas along the interstates and along the U.S. highways in the coming year. We are also investing heavily in litter collection. One of the other challenges we have is we find McDonald's and Burger King cups along the right-of-way often, and then we come through and we mow. And so that McDonald's cup now becomes shredded into a million pieces and it compounds our litter issues. So we have continued on our partnership with the Department of Corrections, and I see them often in those blue school buses with our folks and with representatives from the Department of Correction on utilizing those folks and having them help do litter collection along the roadside. We have spent a lot of man hours this year seeing what our peers are doing, Ohio and Kentucky, for example, and we've created a program that we think vegetation control and litter collection will be significantly enhanced in the coming year. And so for me, a non-engineer who doesn't quite understand how a bridge is designed or built, and I readily admit that, I do notice tires alongside of the highway, and I do notice those trash bags alongside of the highway, and so those become a pet peeve of mine, as I know it does many of you in the room. And so we are addressing that, and I think you will be impressed with the advancement that we've made in this coming year. So here's a little bit about how those dollars are going to be spent. That $30+ million are going to be spent along the roadside, which that number, honestly, it kind of blows me away, but that's what it takes, unfortunately, to take care of some of the issues that we have. It has become a game or a hobby of mine that as I travel around the state, I watch for those dumpster trucks that aren't, or the dump trucks that don't have their loads covered, and how much trash actually does blow out of those. It is amazing, and it does impact what you see here on the budget with over almost $8 million being spent on litter and debris collection. Other priorities in 2019, we will very soon be announcing the local tracks overpass program. As you can see in the numbers there, we received 28 grants. These are typically, they are all much larger projects than you will find in a community crossings program, for example. And we anticipate that we will be making those announcements here in the next in the coming weeks, and we're excited about that program as well. Oversized overweight vehicle permitting process, something that we are working with Department of Revenue as well as Indiana State Police and streamlining that process, and it will go full electronic processing next summer, in the summer of 2019. My last slide before I kick it over to Mr. Broussard for more of the financials. Real quick, I can actually update this. As you all know in the room, the tolling study has been completed, submitted to the governor, who has now kicked it over to your committee. And late last week, last Thursday afternoon, I believe, we will continue to pursue and look at options. What are other states doing? For example, I was honored to serve on the first task force a couple of years ago representing cities and towns, and I sat in that chair right there actually, and heard from what other states are doing. For example, Oregon is looking at vehicle miles traveled. Is that an option here for Indiana in the coming years? Is this something out there that no one has thought of, no one has created, that is available for long-term road funding? We are comfortable and confident, and as you'll see some of the numbers here shortly, that as you see some of our next level roads maps and the planning that we have for the next number of years, we are confident that we have the resources available to tackle those projects. But we also know with the innovation, I just walked back this morning from an autonomous vehicle group that was met over at the Salesforce Tower. So we know that those types of technologies are out there, and we have to be planning for those in the future, knowing that I'm probably not going to be sitting in the seat when those technologies are being, or when they're available for us to purchase. But I think it's incumbent upon me to make sure that we're planning and prepared for those technologies in the future.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you. The next set of slides will be our data slides, and the first one we're leading with here are the revenues and resources, and this is really a comprehensive look of NDOT's full program as far as revenues. You can see by the various stacked bars that we have included federal funds. You see community crossings, certainly the local program, which is largely made up of federal funds that are overseen by NDOT, passed over to the locals, is impacting this chart. For disclosure, we've also shown in the green, that's the next level connections. That's the timing of the receipts coming into NDOT over the next 3 years. And then probably the biggest takeaway on this chart will be the dark blue stack bar, which is the state highway revenues, which courtesy of House Bill 1290 in 2018 and 1002 in 2017, largely the fuel tax increase is what's driving that significant ramp up. Turning to the next slide, this is really showing just what I just mentioned in more vivid detail, the total state highway revenue, again, largely driven by the increase in fuel tax. And then moving on, you can see here is our capital program. This is really, the capital program is what we refer to as our build out. Probably more than anything, what we're judged by, I guess. It doesn't necessarily include our operational expenses. This is really the preliminary engineering, the construction, the purchase of right-of-way, and you can see the significant increase of that. Again, next level connections is shown on this chart. You can see those monies, small amount in 2019 and then running out through 2023. You can see some further uses of those funds. It should be noted here that the blue, which is the preservation program, largely makes up the agency spend. And that's totally consistent with all of the presentations that were leading up to the increase in fuel tax. It's certainly shown here on this chart very vividly. Looking at the next chart, this is really a look at a pie chart illustration talking about the expenditures. Again, this is a comprehensive look, which includes all of the funds that are actually deployed by NDOT. I think the key takeaway on this, you can see that over half of the spend is in the capital program itself, 56.2%. Probably the biggest takeaway is that over 92% of the total expenditures are going directly to the state's transportation infrastructure. What's in the 8%, things like multimodal, which would be going to transit. You also have buildings and grounds, which are not included in the 92%. So those are the kind of outliers that don't go directly to the state's infrastructure. Now getting in more closely to the biennium budget summary, which is what we're here to really talk about. This is another reflection of sources and revenues. What we do in this slide is we actually show the actual biennium year, fiscal year 20, fiscal year 21, and then we show a comparison of those dollars by category compared to this current biennium, which is fiscal year 18 and 19. You know, really, it doesn't take too much to look at this slide. While it's busy, I can tell you that on the very first line, the State Highway Fund is the key driver. That's the $403 million, again, largely driven by the gasoline and diesel tax increase. If you then scroll down, you can see community crossings on this, which is a $99 million increase. That's a 35% jump. Certainly, community crossings was funded in those House bills as well. So it's a significant driver. And then if you scroll down to the very last line before the summary total on total revenues, you see major moves. Of course, that's the legacy program that really began back in '06, and it's on its decline. And you can see that we're looking at $90 million less in this coming biennium than what we spent in the fiscal years of 18 and 19. And last, we get into some additional pie charts now. This is showing our transportation expenditures for 20 and 21. It's very similar to the chart that we showed earlier for the combined year. The total annual, so the dollars that are actually in the pie chart are for the biennium period. If you split that into an average annual amount, you'll see that it's about $2.67 billion that's being deployed by NDOT on an annual basis. In the chart to the far right of the pie chart, you can see the percentage makeup of the various categories of spend. And then looking at the operational budget, you can see over half of the expenditures there are made up of labor and benefits. The other categories the Commissioner referred to, the maintenance work program, which includes that roadside maintenance program, buildings and grounds, vehicle maintenance equipment, and fuel and supplies make up the larger other categories. That is a $513 million spend. Again, over half of that is labor and benefits to support the 3,600 employees that run NDOT. So with that, I guess we'll open it for questions.
Yeah, if I go to your chart on 17 here, I want to know, does this include the trails, the broadband, and the flights in there that NDOT's paying for?
It does not. That's not included in there.
So if it's coming from NDOT and it's not in your projections, it's not in the $1 billion from the toll road, where is it?
Where are the dollars at? So the broadband is funded through NDOT. The 90 million trails is through DNR. So those funds will be shifted to it through DNR. And then the direct flights is IEDC.
But we were told that the money for the trails is coming from NDOT to DNR.
That's right.
But it's not in here.
I don't.
No, we did not reflect that because we're just showing the capital program.
So this is all just kind of laying out here in the middle of nowhere somewhere, and then it's going to get transferred to the airport and to the.
So keep in mind too, this is our capital program. So these are the projects that we are building out, whether it's a road, a bridge, any of those capital expenditures that we are responsible for.
Another question. So, when we passed this transportation bill, it was about finish what we started, fix what we have. The two big projects we'd started are 69 and 31. I don't see 31 there. Then, we get another $1 billion out of the folks up there on the toll road, and I think at least then you'd kind of list 31 somewhere to finish, and I'm still not seeing it. So can you kind of fill me in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you that that there's probably not a bigger champion for finishing US 31 than Governor Holcomb. He and I have gone to South Bend and various other locations to speak and do different events. He wants to see 0 stoplights, traffic signals along US 31. So currently in the plan with Next Level Connections is that we have 6 today from Indianapolis to South Bend, 6 traffic signals. The plan with that is we will now have it down and 2 at-grade rail crossings. So with the plan, it will get it down to 0 rail crossings and 2 traffic signals left. And we won't stop there.
on your, what are the consulting services, the line item, you went from 50 million up to 83 million. Why is it 30 million in consulting services?
Which slide are you on? I'm sorry.
Line 1007 in your,
Oh,
what?
not on the spreadsheet.
The 01A report, says the expert.
Increasing well, I mean, keep in mind that we are going to be going from roughly 750 projects a year to 1,000 plus with the new road funding package, Next Level Roads. And so with that is going to require us to have additional consulting services to build out, to do design work, to do inspection work, to do all of those kind of things. Consulting services are, one of those necessary things for us to engage with, whether that's a large project like completing I-69 Section 6, or as Senator Mishler alluded to, US 31 building interchanges, or just doing some typical hydraulic work, some hydrology work on a small structure repair, and pick any one of the 92 counties.
Okay, I've had some questions from some road contracting businesses. I don't think in your budget you are reappointing or a position for a highway engineer, state highway engineer, are you?
I didn't hear everything, but I'm not
To
sure.
have a state highway engineer, do you have that position? I've been told you don't have that position anymore.
State highway engineers?
The state highway engineer.
Perfect. So we just posted a position last Thursday.
But is it overarching?
Yes.
Not, okay. And
Yes.
so, okay, that's good to know. And
Yes.
their concern was also that some of the projects may be not duplicative, but maybe coming back to some of the same areas. Obviously, I travel 69. I couldn't tell you if you're doing the same thing more than once, because it just seems like everything is a barrel. But good progress is being made, I hope. But my concern is when you get to the consulting services and things like that, and what I'm understanding from the construction side is about 30% is safety, right? And so if you have to go back time and again, that's money that's being spent on something we're not getting any capital.
Absolutely.
Right? So the point is, who is the one who's going to say, okay, we got to do the bridge, we're going to do this, we're going to do all these things here on 30 or 69 or whatever, and even though this is a longer term, we're going to do it all at once, because that safety piece of 30% of a project really starts to add up if you keep going back and back, like
Sure.
the same parts of 69. So who would be the one? Is that the highway engineer's position to say?
So when you talk about specific projects, US 30, for example, and in your district, so projects that are determined that are going to be completed in the next 2 or 3 years, whatever that may be, are driven by the districts. So the Fort Wayne District Office, for example, would be one that would present projects to be completed in their district, and then brought down here to Indianapolis, and then reviewed and designed and value engineered and all of those kind of things to establish a project and to get it to full development.
And then one of the parameters would be then, okay, project A is on the list, project C wasn't, but because you're doing A, we should do C at the same time, right? Because it's on the same stretch of highway.
That's right.
or
And then we have an asset management plan that we continuously are working to improve to make sure that we're taking care of, as it was alluded to earlier, taking care of what we have.
Okay, and then with respect to the airport development grant, another big increase in the budget. What is that 3.8 million that you're anticipating each year? What is that? I assume you're not building out new runways or things like that.
No. So we partner with over 100 regional, municipal airports around the state, and we have an entire aviation team here in Indianapolis, and they work with and support and provide grant opportunities, typically through federal funds, for those airports for inspections of their runways, for example, to see what the surface of the taxiway or the runway may be. And then providing them with the opportunities for maintenance work and improvements, and then also that provides that connection to the federal government.
So this money is not, for example, subsidizing any flights?
That's right.
Okay.
That-
And
that's
then
right.
finally, with respect to the right-of-way, because that's a big increase as well, Is any of that, or with respect to the broadband piece through the new toll road lease or amended toll road lease, is any of the right-of-way, is any broadband anticipated being in any right-of-way? Is that one of the reasons there's such an increase in that?
No, the increase in, as you heard me talk about earlier, the right-of-way operations and maintenance is for the mowings and the litter collections. The broadband, we have broadband and we have all sorts of utilities in our right-of-way all over the state. Gas, I mean, you name it, and it's probably touching our state highway system somewhere. We do not own any of those, whether it's a telecommunications system or utility. And so we have, broadband, we have right-of-way opportunities for if a broadband company wants to enter our right-of-way. We just announced one earlier this year for the first time, open up the interstate right-of-way. So I-69, 65, 465, whatever, for deployment of broadband. We don't have any investment in that, fiscal investment in that. It is just merely a relationship with a broadband provider.
So they're not paying for it?
They are.
They're paying for a right to use it?
That's correct.
Okay, so then the money that you're going to funnel through in the broadband from the toll road lease, is that going to be something NDOT owns?
Yes,
But if you-
that program, yeah. We do not own the physical.
That's what I mean.
No,
When
no.
you fund a broadband project going
Right.
forward with the toll road, you're not going to own it?
No,
Okay, thanks.
no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The funding that was raised from the tax hikes, generated from the gas tax increases, has that been enough to adequately fund your road projects that you have moving going forward?
Yes. So so a clarification, so the immediate fuel tax increase occurred in July of 17. Keeping in mind the sales tax on that fuel will transition over the next 4 or 5 years. That's kind of why you see that stair step in the revenue forecast going out into the future. So
Is that-
about 7.5% will then transition to about 72.5%. We are not there obviously yet, but we have plenty of work, and we are comfortable with the funding we have to get those projects done.
And so, that being said, then when do you think you'll get the backlog caught up, the roads and stuff that you guys?
Unfortunately, well, I would love to say that we're going to work ourselves out of business, but unfortunately that's not the case. So, as you saw on the first slide, we have almost 30,000 miles of road and over 5,700 bridges. And if we continue to have winters like we did last year, I don't know that we're ever going to be completely caught up on what we have. So, but that is our main focus. So, right now, our 7-year plan is to tackle and to touch every single road that we are responsible for and the bridges around the state of Indiana. We do have some capital improvements along the way, adding travel lanes and finishing I-69, those kind of things. But a vast majority of our investment is purely in preservation of what we have.
So that's the road maintenance?
That's right.
Okay, and then, all right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, my name is Greg Porter. I'm the guy who wrote you 2 or 3 times in February and January in regards to downtown 6570. And I appreciate you sending over Mr. Dietrich and Mr. Alderman. But I would like to one day sit down, if you will allow me to have a conversation with you in regards to what's going on in NDOT.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that was the last one for the day. So we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Just a reminder that we will meet next Monday, the 10th at 10 a.m. and hopefully back in room 431, unless you hear otherwise. You can come over here if you want. You can watch it on the screen. We'll put the webcam on. You can watch us over there.